oh, if you watch a few of her videos, you realize she's an agent of chaos. Like,
Hello everyone and welcome back to Role Diversity on my YouTube channel. If you're not familiar with what we're doing today, on this show we talk to people from all across the world and all across the sort of hobby nerd crafting space, and we try and talk to people from diverse backgrounds who aren't traditionally the majority demographic for these kinds of things, especially when it comes to things like tabletop RPGs and war games. And really happy to have Raquel with me today from Raquel's Art, which is an amazing YouTube channel that's focused on all sorts of crafting things.
yeah, I mean, that was a great introduction, so thank you so much. Yeah, I'm Raquel, and I have been YouTubing for just under 2 years. It'll be 2 years end of the summer, and yeah, I also love Dungeons and Dragons, and kind of the combination of the two have led me to a lot of new people, a lot of new games, a lot of new crafting ideas, art projects. It's been a really wonderful experience being a creator on the internet. Only a little bit of cyberbullying, which is great.
We always want to try and minimize the cyberbullying. I know I've had my fair share already. You can see, before we jump into my questions, I've got one which wasn't on the list, just your Boba Fett behind you, who I love.
Boba Fett.
Finished watching the videos, I think yesterday, the 2 parts. That's such a cool project. That's the latest thing you've made, right?
Yes, and thank you for watching the videos. I've been joking that that's my life's work. Yeah, so, I mean, but it was a 2 video series of this Boba Fett that is made out of all sorts of trash. I don't want to tell you everything he's made out of because, people watching this should go watch my videos, but it took me months and months and months to finish him. And part of that was I got COVID, unfortunately, in the middle of the build. And part of that was I'm really good at jumping into projects without fully thinking out projects. So there's a lot of that as well.
Well, he looks amazing now, and yeah, if you haven't seen
Thank
those 2
you.
videos, shamelessly plugging those latest 2 because they're really cool, and I love
Thank
the
you
process.
so much.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. My first question is, how did you get into doing all of this kind of stuff, like hobbying, crafting, that kind of thing? Like, what's your background in?
Yeah, so honestly, as a kid, I was always really artistic, like, you couldn't catch me without a box of crayons kind of vibe. And when I was very young, my mom started my brother and I in sculpting classes. That's kind of been one of those things I took for granted, because now as an adult, getting back into sculpting, I'm like, oh, I'm not that bad at sculpting. So that's been kind of nice, like recognizing how powerful that background is for me. And then, believe it or not, in high school, I was pushed into a science and technology program. And when I got to college, I was a fine arts minor, and I took several color theory classes, and I took some watercolor was my favorite. In hindsight, if I went back in time, I probably wouldn't go to college, truth be told, if I went back in time. But I also, if I did go to college in this alternate universe, I would probably major in art. That's kind of my start. And then for many, many years, I didn't make anything. I don't know, probably had 10 years where I didn't really paint. I didn't do anything. And what brought me back to it was COVID, actually, and getting furloughed from my job. And I'm a very social person normally. I'm a big outdoorsy person. It felt socially irresponsible to mountain bike or rock climb. I stopped doing those things, and I just kind of started creating again. It felt really good. Like, a big part of, I think, what roped me back into being artistic again was I've been playing D&D for a while, and I had picked up some miniatures, and that was actually one of my first videos, was painting a mini that I had gotten for D&D. So
Did you get back into crafting like first and then decide to film for YouTube, or did they come together?
it was pretty close. So I guess it's like I say I hadn't seriously done anything for years, but I always felt like I was a good painter, and I got back into like flat painting, not mini painting. Started doing pet portraits. A few people saw them, so then I started getting commissioned pet portraits, and I guess that gave me a little bit of confidence to like start my YouTube channel. And my partner, actually, he has a YouTube channel that he started before me. And I guess he saw me just kind of like floundering with nothing to do. And he encouraged me to start the YouTube. So like I started it borrowing his camera and using my phone as my microphone and sitting in my living room and, you know, giving some hot takes about miniature painting when I knew nothing.
Most of the people that we've talked to on this series have been mainly into like Warhammer and miniature painting, whereas your channel is a bit broader in its focus on sort of just like crafting. In general, you've done like trash things and monster bashes and modeling with clay. And what kind of universes do you like to make stuff for, and like materials? Is it just anything and everything?
Yeah, I would say so. Like if someone off the street asked me like what my YouTube channel was, like I think my overarching theme would be fantasy art. Grew up loving sci-fi and Lord of the Rings. I started playing Dungeons and Dragons in 2018, 2017, and just have never stopped. And I've been involved in like multiple like long running campaigns, and now I am in the Dungeons and Dragons podcast 20 Realms. Check it out. That is a big source of inspiration for me, Dungeons and Dragons. Like even if it isn't a miniature, we've made a vampire hunting kit inspired by Curse of Strahd. That's one of my favorite realms, and I would, it's weird because it's like for the crafting part of it, I've kind of gravitated towards making props, I guess you would say. Now that I'm describing these things out loud, I'm like, wow, what a discovery. That's what I've been doing this whole time, huh?
I love the channels, yours and a few others, that have taken like a really holistic approach to making stuff. I really love to expand my own hobby into that kind of space as well. Like and the projects that I'm in awe of yours are things like the Boba Fett model, or your Monster Bash creations, first or second Monster Bash that you did with Miscast and all those other people.
Oh yeah, the crystal bird, that's actually the first Monster Bash. Also, before we gloss over it, I love your mini painting videos because like as not an expert, yours are super accessible for me and I really enjoyed them. Yeah, the crystal bird, it's over there. I'm always scared to move my stuff, especially like on camera because I'll knock it over. But the crystal bird was actually from the first Monster Bash, which was originally me, Nerdcraft HQ, Berserker Works, and Miscast. They were like my first YouTube friends, and we, you know, in the time of lockdown, I was just on Discord all the time with them. I consider them my best friends to this day, and I got to meet Bill in person at Adepticon in Chicago, and that was really awesome. And we just came up with the Monster Bash idea, kind of inspired by, you know, when you're in school and you're a kid and you fold up a piece of paper and everybody draws a part of a body and then you pass it around. That was our original inspiration for Monster Bash. I want to say it kind of got out of hand and that we just kept inviting more and more people to do the Monster Bash. You know, I don't want to say too much, but there will be a Monster Bash 4 and it will be a little bit different.
Being able to make friends and make amazing things is kind of what this is all about, right? I think. What is it like being a woman or a femme presenting person with a YouTube channel that's a bit larger? And do you face any extra challenges, or are there any extra opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I think yes to both of that, challenges and opportunities. I will say an interesting thing that's happened to me, and I feel incredibly lucky. You know, a lot of YouTubers, they say as their channels get bigger, you start getting more mean comments. And it's been interesting for me because I feel like when I first started my channel, there was just this sense that people just thought I was doing it wrong and they like wanted to, you know, I hate using the term mansplain me, but I got a lot of comments like that where it was like, okay, yeah, you did this, but you should have done this. Not helpful. It's one thing if it's like, you know, if I'm doing like a resin video and you're like, oh, here's some information to make this go easier for you next time. But when people tell you to do something completely differently, it really sucks. And I got so many of those comments. And so like I started off getting a lot of those comments. But it's kind of interesting because I feel like as I've established my channel more, I get way less of those kind of comments. And I don't know if that's maybe just like those people stopped watching, or if that's like, oh, if you watch a few of her videos, you realize she's an agent of chaos. Like, so that's probably one of the most negative things I've seen. You get comments where I'm like, oh, you're so pretty. Like, how could you have made this? Like, tell me the truth. Did you actually make this? And I think they think they're cute or something, but I just find that incredibly insulting. Especially it's like, you know, like I'm working on my confidence and YouTube has actually helped my confidence, but like I'm not someone who's had a super strong body image my entire life. So it's just like, I don't know. I don't want those comments where you're taking it away from the project and focusing on my looks, positive or negative. I feel like being a woman and like physically being in hobby spaces like conventions or like hobby stores or whatnot, the ratio is still off, unfortunately. And in a lot of situations I've had, I feel like people are generally excited for me to be there. And like, especially because I've tried to introduce a lot of my friends to it. So it's like, I'm showing up and I'm bringing in another woman who's never seen D&D, you know, and at least the people I surround myself with are very supportive of that. I definitely think, honestly, just based from like crappy stuff I've seen on Instagram, I think there's a lot of people who don't support women in hobby spaces, which is insane. But I will also say that, like, unfortunately, that kind of sexism exists everywhere. Like I mentioned earlier, like I'm a huge outdoorsy person, and really hard to find like a group of female rock climbers or a group of female mountain bikers. I think it's just so challenging to push yourself to try something new when you don't see anyone who looks like you or has a similar perspective as you doing that thing.
Part of the reason that I am doing this is for that, right? Is to show more
Yeah.
people that there are people like us who do these kinds of things, you know, and there are people like all of the other guests that we've had on as well.
Yeah, and like I said, it's like it's so many categories. Like I was even watching a video about like why aren't there more professional female gamers, and it's some of it is beyond just the other humans interacting in these different hobby spaces, and some of it is like what is marketed to us. Like video games are primarily marketed towards men, and that's how I feel about miniatures too. It's like I mentioned earlier, like I love like sci-fi, like sexy lady with a gun or like in a loincloth, like fighting a dinosaur. Like there's definitely a place for like that kind of like interesting style of art.
Yeah.
But when the only miniatures you can find easily of women are just like naked warriors, it starts to get a little ridiculous. Creating more spaces in the hobby for like women and non-binary people to connect and have their voices heard is hopefully going to translate to companies listening, you know.
We spoke earlier about how you were recently diagnosed as being bipolar. How important is this kind of hobby for your mental health, and has your diagnosis affected the ways you interact with our hobby?
I was just diagnosed in January, and it's very interesting because I've told some of my friends and they're like, or like coworkers, and they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," which is a weird response because I'm like, yeah, but I've been this way my whole life, so it's not like I broke my leg. It has been extremely validating, and I've started medication, and I was in therapy, but I'm continuing therapy, and I'm honestly feeling like the best I've ever felt. I often felt like I was swimming upstream and just not able to keep up with everyone, and I never understood why. Like I never understood why I could have like a bunch of days where I'm super productive and I'm crushing it and I'm barely sleeping, and then I just burn out and I can't do anything, or I'm crying and I'm calling out of work, and I didn't understand why I couldn't keep up. And now I have a reason, and I have a medication I can take that like really reduces those feelings. But in terms of like the creative part, it shed a lot of light on a lot of things. So I'm bipolar type 2. So I don't, from what my doctors can tell and what I think, I don't experience true mania. I experience hypomania, which is it's just not as intense. But I did used to have these days where I would probably get 3 hours of sleep, but I would wake up and I would feel energized. I'd feel fantastic. I would work on something for 12 hours straight and not feel tired. I think part of the reason it took me so long to get help or to try to get a diagnosis is you don't realize something's wrong when you feel this way. My psychiatrist was even like, do you have moments when you just feel on top of the world and like you're like that put together like yoga influencer and you're zen with the universe? And I'm like, yeah, totally. Just like you feel really good and you feel really energized, that it's hard to recognize that it's bad. My brain always played this trick on me that I was like, I'm gonna be this way forever. But then what happens is you crash after that, and it's It's so easy when you're feeling down. It's like I would have the same feeling of I'm going to be this way forever. When you're down, you're like, wow, I've never been happy. I never will be happy. And it's really hard to do anything. Like if you've ever been in that state of depression where it's like, you know, you're depressed, you know, if you do something, you'll feel better, but you don't want to do anything because you don't like anything anymore, even though you know that's not true. It's such a sinking feeling. It's such a heavy feeling that way. When I was first diagnosed, I kept a mood tracker. I started looking at patterns. So if I did have those days where I'm riding the high, it almost always came with the downslope. But another thing I started tracking in addition to just my mood in this journal was like if I was getting exercise, if I was socializing, if I was creative. And those three things really help to keep me as even keel as I can. Like even now, I feel like I need to be doing at least one of those three things every day. I never realized until I started tracking it how important it is for me to date and connect with people too, which is again kind of going back to this community. It kind of allows you to do both at the same time. Like in my patron Discord, we actually will do craft alongs, and it's super low key, and I almost never get anything done, but I enjoy it so much, and it's just so nice to see these creative people like chatting and connecting, and it's been so good for me. Like I mentioned earlier, like I went so long without like actively creating anything, and now diagnosis I feel even more compelled to be like, this is part of my brain that needs to happen, and if it doesn't happen, like I'm probably going to feel worse. So I just have a deepened appreciation for a lot of things as kind of a consequence of this, and it's really nice. I feel like I'm in this really great chapter of my life where I am actively trying to recognize the things that help me and can help those around me, and like I have a better understanding of what's going on, and it feels great.
Thank you for sharing that. I hope
Yeah. No, thank you for giving me a platform to talk about it. Like it is a scary thing to share, like to let people know that like, oh, I'm permanently this person. I've been this person this whole time. I will be this person. It makes me feel like people perceive me as being not reliable or something like that. But at the same time, one of the most important things for me in this time of self-discovery has been how open my friends are with me, and how they were open with me before and now, and I have several other very close friends who are bipolar. I don't know what I would have done, like how I would have coped with it if I didn't have those people in my life. So as much as it feels really scary to like publicly share this information, I also feel like it's super valuable.
Yeah, so I've got two more questions for you, and these two have been the same pretty much for everyone. And the first one is this. What do you think that the less marginalized people within the sort of nerdy, crafty hobby space need to do to make the hobbies as inclusive as possible?
To credit a lot of my friends, like my friends I referenced earlier, Miss Cass, Nerdcraft HQ, and Berserker Works, like they are really great advocates of different people in the hobby, you know, and it's not just women, it's people of color, it's non-binary people, it's trans people, there are so many people engaged in this hobby, and we need to be giving them a voice. You know, those friends I mentioned, like they're really good at that stuff. And then Miss Cass Trent, he has started featuring his girlfriend a lot on his channel, and she's creating art for him, and he and like I know this from like the back end of it because he reached out to me when my channel was super small. It's like Trent purposely searches out smaller channels, and when we were doing, I forget which Monster Bash this was, but like when we were like, because since we're like the founders of Monster Bash, like the four of us kind of decide like who we're inviting in, and we tried our best to make sure we were collecting a diverse group. And sometimes it's hard because and I even put up a few polls on like my Instagram and my YouTube, and like I'm like, show me your favorite female creators, show me your favorite like just non-white dude creators. Like we're like so it's hard. I think we need to pay attention to it. And I'm also really proud of like all my friends like Lila Mev and Zambies, who are constantly just like doing Instagram stories where they're like tagging other female painters. And I love seeing that stuff. It's super easy to do it too. And there's no reason we can't all just jump on that bandwagon when you see someone doing like a nice story like that on Instagram. Yeah, and I think another thing that's cool, like you mentioned, do you have more than one kid? Just the one
One
kiddo?
kid, just one.
Yeah. Well, I feel like as I get older, I have so many friends with kids, and they are teaching their kids about the hobbies and like teaching their kids D&D and like to paint miniatures and stuff. And it's like, I don't know anyone who's just teaching it to their boys or just their girls. And I think that points to a bright future.
We absolutely do. And yeah, I feel personally, I feel like it's going in the right direction. I think that
Yeah.
there's, now compared to 5-10 years ago. And this is the last question, and I've asked it to everyone. In your ideal world, what does the future of our hobby look like?
I don't know. Like my brain immediately goes to like everyone has a 3D printer and there's better programs for 3D sculpting, but I don't even know that like I want that to be a thing because I kind of wrestle with like, oh, like 3D printers make a lot of waste, but I don't know why my brain goes there first. But then it's taken me somewhere else, and the other place it takes me is I would love to see more maker spaces in this world. And I have this perception, and I might be wrong because I am an American, but I have this perception of like Americans don't appreciate the arts as much as like not every place, but like there's definitely countries and places where being an artist is more respected. And even in like the fine art world, it's really hard to make it. It's really hard to be valued. And there's only certain things that seem to be really valued now. What would life be without art, without hobbies? Even like a job like being a mechanic, like what would we do without mechanics? But like that job isn't a super respected thing. And I think there's like this imbalance of values, right? And I would love to see like the future of like creativity in general, like not just like specific hobbies, just be respected more and to be acknowledged more. And I think, tying it back even to the mental health is like being able to create and express yourself just lets out so much of the bad feelings. So I would love to see like more maker spaces, more opportunity for kids to take art classes even. Like I know not every school even offers it. I used to be a substitute teacher, and I substituted it like for a long time at this one charter school where the kids didn't really have that opportunity, and the one art class they could take was online. And these are like middle school kids, which that really sucks. And there's definitely a huge value in science and math, but not everybody's brain is going to excel doing that. And I think once we recognize that and encourage kids and adults, going back to anyone, to invest in their creativity, that's the future I would like to see. Is more maker spaces, more like larger institutions really valuing that, and eventually like a cultural shift to appreciate the arts and creativity and like understand the benefit it can have to our mental health and making us more well-rounded people.
This interview has been so good, I think. Learned loads about your processes. I've learned loads about like the benefits of creativity for mental health. And I think that, just we need to keep on doing what we're doing and make the world a better, more creative place. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for being vulnerable with me as well. This has been wonderful, and I applaud you for making a platform for these kind of conversations.
Every one of these episodes that I have made, at least one person has commented or told me that they got something out of it. And that's really all I wanted. So yeah, it was amazing.